Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Qi. Coming up in this edition, The Atlantic magazine reviews more about the US war plans for strikes on Yemen, while European officials monitor the fallout from the security breach. A Hamas-affiliated news agency reports that spokesperson Abdul Latif al-Khan of the group has died in an Israeli airstrike on northern Gaza. And Sudan's army chief announces Khartoum's full liberation from the paramilitary rapid support forces. We begin in North America. The Atlantic magazine has released more details about U.S. war plans for strikes on Yemen. Its editor-in-chief received the information after someone mistakenly added him to a group chat with top Trump administration security officials. The White House denies sharing any classified information. Questions remain about how a journalist got into the chat and why U.S. national security officials used the app Signal to discuss secret military plans. Jim Spellman has this report.
The Atlantic's editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg, chose not to publish sensitive military information in his initial story detailing how U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz included him in a text message group on the app Signal about an attack on Houthi rebels in Yemen.
I made the decision that the technical aspects of this, including what kinds of weapons packages, the attack sequencing, and so on, that's not necessarily in the public interest. What's in the public interest is that they were running a war plan on a messaging app.
But facing pressure over the embarrassing and potentially dangerous episode, U.S. President Donald Trump and others asserted that no classified information was shared in the Signal group. So the Atlantic reversed course and has now published operational details of the attack that killed dozens. The messages included minute-by-minute updates from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who writes Team Update and goes on to detail fighter jet and drone movements and timing of initial strikes. The location and apparent killing by missile of a high-profile, quote, target terrorist while at his girlfriend's apartment is also described. Other group members sent congratulations using words and emojis.
It's a level of recklessness that I have not seen in many years of reporting on national security issues.
At a House hearing on Wednesday, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard and CIA Director John Ratcliffe, who were both on the Signal thread, defended their communications but admitted mistakes were made and seemed to shift blame toward the National Security Advisor and Defense Secretary.
It was a mistake that a reporter was inadvertently added to a Signal chat with high-level national security principals having a policy discussion about imminent strikes against the Houthis and the effects of the strike. National Security Advisor has taken full responsibility for this.
Republicans are now calling for an investigation, and Democrats want accountability.
Operational security is a basic but critical function, and it's something that's taught to the very youngest service members. And what we saw in this breach, in this leak, is those basic ideas thrown out, because there's a sense of callousness, of indifference, of lack of accountability in this administration that is deeply disturbing.
Many critics of President Trump and his administration say they won't be satisfied until someone is fired. They're focusing their criticism on National Security Advisor Michael Waltz and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth.
That was Jim Spellman there. Meanwhile, European governments and intelligence officials are closely monitoring the fallout from the security breach. The revealed messages included harsh criticism of European allies from top Trump administration officials. Trent Murray sent this report from Berlin.
The fallout from the leaked Signal chat between senior US defense officials is being closely followed here in Europe, particularly given the conversation seemingly gave an unfiltered insight into the Trump administration's views on its transatlantic partner. With Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth describing Europe as, quote, freeloading and pathetic, European capitals have been responding. In London, the Armed Forces Minister Luke Pollard said that if such an incident occurred in the UK, there would be clear consequences and disciplinary action, while the leader of the opposition Liberal Democratic Party, Ed Davey, said such incidents will make security services nervous about US-UK intelligence sharing. However, the UK's Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner said relations with Washington are as strong as they've ever been. News of the content of the conversation comes at a time when much of Europe remains concerned about the rhetoric coming out of the US towards Europe. The European Council of Foreign Relations recently concluded that President Trump isn't plotting against Europe, but rather increasingly views the bloc as geopolitically irrelevant. While the Italian Institute for International Affairs has said that the Trump administration sees Europe not merely as a competitor, but also as an economic and even ideological threat. Meanwhile, while not addressing the leak directly, the president of the European Council, Antonio Costa, said recent geopolitical tensions confirmed Europe needs to acquire all the means necessary to defend itself against military aggression, adding that peace without defence is, quote, an illusion. And new data released Tuesday by the European Parliament reveals the combative rhetoric out of the US is seemingly having a galvanising effect on the people of Europe. A new survey shows 74% of EU citizens believe that being part of the bloc benefits them. It's the highest number since that question was first asked all the way back in 1983. While 9 in 10 EU citizens said they believe that member states should be more united to face current global challenges.
That was Trent Murray reporting. US President Donald Trump has announced new tariffs on all cars not made on American soil. The 25% automobile levies will take effect in April and will affect all foreign-made vehicles and light trucks. Wall Street stocks plummeted following the announcement. Putin has more from Washington, D.C.
These auto tariffs of 25% are going to be really a big hurt for a lot of Americans. It's not only going to impact consumers, they're going to be paying more for their cars. Some analysts suggesting as much as $3,000 upwards to as much as $12,000. We also have domestic automakers warning that there could be job losses. Trump, for his part, though, with his announcement from the Oval Office, positive that this will have a long-term net benefit for the country.
So we'll effectively be charging a 25% tariff. But if you build your car in the United States, there is no tariff. And what that means is a lot of foreign car companies, a lot of companies are going to be in great shape because they've already built their plant. But their plants are underutilized, so they'll be able to expand them inexpensively and quickly. But others will come into our country and build, and they're already looking for sites. They're looking for mostly sites. They don't want to take the old buildings that are empty and falling down. They want to build new, and there's tremendous action.
It's not just car makers, it's also countries that are concerned. While it may be true that there could be some impetus and growth as some companies decide that it is best for them to invest in the United States, ultimately the immediate to medium-term impact is going to be financial pain. We have heard at the outset from, for example, Canada, the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, calling this tariff announcement on auto parts as well as cars a direct attack on their economy. Of course, Canada, a historic ally of the United States. On top of that, we've also heard from Europe, which is a huge trading partner for the United States, Germany being just one such country. We heard European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen saying while they will seek negotiated solutions, they vow to protect their workers as well as consumers and businesses.
That's Putin in Washington. Following the auto tariff announcement, Beijing says there will be no winner in any trade or tariff wars. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jiakun stresses that U.S. import duties not only violate WTO rules, but harm global trade and its own national interests. Other U.S. trading partners have also expressed frustration over the planned auto tariffs. Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Shiba said Japan will consider an appropriate response, vowing that all options are on the table. The Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders in the United Kingdom said the decision is disappointing and called for reaching a deal that works for all. Staying in the United States, a coalition of nearly 300 business groups is urging the Trump administration to abandon a plan to levy million-dollar fees on Chinese-linked ships every time they dock at a U.S. port. It's part of Trump's plan to revitalize American shipbuilding and punish China for what the administration views as unfair competition in the sector. At hearings in Washington, U.S. shipping operators warned the plan could backfire, leading to job losses and falling exports. Kate Fisher has the story.
This week's hearings are really a last-ditch plea from businesses for President Trump to reject these planned port fees. The CEO of the largest US-owned international ocean cargo carrier said the fees could, quote, unintentionally destroy American-owned carriers. Under the proposal, companies using Chinese-made ships to transport goods will be charged up to $1.5 million every time that vessel enters a US port. There would be additional fees if Chinese-made ships make up the majority of their fleet. Altogether, the fees could top $3 million per port visit, substantially increasing the cost of shipping goods, a cost that will be passed along to consumers. During these hearings, US companies claim they will be the ones bearing the brunt of these fees and that it will be extremely challenging and costly for them to switch out their fleets because there are few alternatives. Commercial shipbuilding in the US is virtually non-existent. Only about 5 ships are turned out every year, compared to more than 1,000 in China. So many of these companies rely on China-made vessels. The CEO of the Chamber of Shipping of America said that penalising China and US operators is not an acceptable result. A recent study shown that the fees could cause exports to fall by nearly 12% and reduce GDP by 0.25 percentage point. China, meanwhile, has blasted the plan, warning it will complicate shipping and endanger seafarers. It will ultimately be President Donald Trump who decides what happens. But this is a crucial moment for the shipping industry, which is not only staring down this potential port fee, but also an escalating trade war, with the president set to announce reciprocal tariffs on global trade partners next week.
That is Kate Fisher reporting. Moving on to the Middle East. A Hamas-affiliated news agency says spokesperson of the group, Abdul Latif al-Qanu, has died in an Israeli airstrike on northern Gaza. The Gaza Health Ministry has reported at least 830 deaths since Israel resumed large-scale strikes on March 18th. Rami Amagari has more.
2 Israeli airstrikes on 2 different parts of the central Gaza Strip, Nusayrat refugee camp and the Zawaida village in central Gaza Strip, where a number of people have been reportedly killed and others injured. In Nusayrat, near a hostess or a place where food is distributed. The latest is the evacuation order for part of the Gaza city, the southern Rimal neighborhood, suburb of Gaza. Yes, the Israeli army ordered the population there to leave ahead of Israeli airstrikes. Regarding the move for against Hamas, this is something that is misunderstood. The Palestinian national and the political parties, including Hamas and many and about 10 parties in Gaza, issued a statement asserting that the move is against the Israeli occupation, the continued Israeli army operations against the Gaza Strip, calling on the world community, on the world to stop that war. That is the latest from the Palestinian factions involving Hamas, Islamic Jihad, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, and other Palestinian political factions.
That was Rami Amagari on confrontation in Gaza. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has threatened to seize parts of Gaza if Hamas does not release the remaining hostages. Hamas warned the hostages would return in coffins if Israel does not stop bombing the Palestinian territory. Jonathan Regev has more from Tel Aviv.
This is perhaps now the policy that Israel wants to convey towards Gaza. If Hamas does not release hostages, then taking over territory and perhaps also implementing the Trump plan. That would be the next thing. It was not only said by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, but also echoed by Defense Minister Israel Katz in comments he made exactly the same thing, telling the residents of Gaza, especially the northern Gaza Strip, that they should evacuate, that Israel is planning to expand the operation and actually seize more land if the hostages are not brought back. Benjamin Netanyahu also used his speech at Parliament for a lot of internal affairs. There's a lot of criticism on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for the latest internal affairs he's been dealing with, the firing of the head of the Internal Security Agency, Ronen Bar. He's also trying to fire the Attorney General. The government approved the 2025 budget, which critics say does not do any good for the entire Israeli population, but only for those sectors supporting the coalition. Benjamin Netanyahu using his speech at the parliament trying to explain all those, but more than anything, Netanyahu stressing that Israel will expand its military operations, will take more land from Hamas in the Gaza Strip unless more hostages are freed. How much impression is this making on Hamas? At least for the moment, it doesn't seem that it's making a lot of impression, as we're not hearing any concessions from Hamas in regards to the hostages.
That was Jonathan Regev in Tel Aviv. And finally, in Africa, the Sudanese army chief has announced the full liberation of Khartoum from the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. The military has moved fast to clear out rebel fighters from the capital since recapturing the presidential palace. The victory is a major gain for the army, sparking a wave of celebrations in the country. But the conflict is not over, with the RSF still holding large swathes of Western Sudan. Naba Muhyiddin has more.
Since the Sudanese military recaptured the presidential palace on Friday, we saw many military advances and we saw militaries gaining big ground in Khartoum on Saturday, Sunday and Monday. The Sudanese army announced that it has fully controlled the capital, and also eyewitnesses and people on ground, emergency room volunteers, neighborhood committees, all confirmed that the Sudanese military is spreading in all of the neighborhoods around the capital and inside the capital. According to the spokesman of the Sudanese army and also a media platform for the Khartoum state, they confirmed that the Sudanese military now is controlling all of the military camps, all of the RSF camps in the capital, and also all of the neighborhoods that used to be controlled by the RSF, and mainly the airport, the most critical infrastructure and the most critical place that RSF was using to attack central Khartoum and also eastern Khartoum. There is few places I can confirm that there is still some RSF soldiers in western Durman, which is the way for them to flee if they want to flee or want to escape to western Sudan. So there is a path between Durman and Kordofan, the only place that RSF soldiers remain there. So right now there is celebrations in the capital itself. People who were trapped for almost 2 years under the RSF control, people who witnessed war crimes, atrocities, and witnessed unprecedented violence and also the risk of famine in Khartoum, now are celebrating the great victory.
That was Naba Muhyiddin on the civil conflict in Sudan. Now, recapping the headlines, The Atlantic magazine has revealed more details about U.S. war plans for strikes on Yemen, while European officials monitor the fallout from the security breach. A Hamas-affiliated news agency has reported that its spokesperson Abdul Latif al-Qanu has died in an Israeli airstrike on northern Gaza. And Sudan's army chief has announced Khartoum's full liberation from the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, our one-hour podcast news magazine program. We would welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Qi Zhi. Thank you for listening.